CSS Media Queries allows you to apply different styling to your web pages depending on certain characteristics, such as the device screen resolution, the orientation, portrait or landscape, the screen aspect ratio, whether the user's opted for the light or dark colour scheme, whether the device can support hovering, such as when using a mouse on a desktop. And you can also select different media types, so the two common ones are any device with a screen, or you can select it to style specifically for when printing something out on paper. Now, we can also apply combinations of all the things I've just mentioned by using the logical operators. We've got the AND operator, the NOT operator, and we've effectively got an OR operator. When we separate media queries into multiple queries on one line using a comma, the comma acts as an OR operator. I've split this tutorial up into 4 sections, so I'll show this screen again at the beginning of each section, and I'll put a little blue tick next to the media features, media types and operators for that section. So let's get started by using the screen media type and by looking at a few examples. All media queries start with @media, which is one of many different @rules available within CSS. Specifying a media type is optional, which is by default assumed to be all types, except when using the NOT or only logical operators, but even so, I'll still be specifying at least one media type value for each query, just to help make things as clear as possible. So let's add some styling for all devices that have screens, such as PCs, tablets and phones. This is our default styling, and these are the media queries that will override the default styling. 3 different ways you can apply media features are as follows: by adding the min and max range prefixes to the width and height properties, by using comparison operators which are available as part of CSS Level 4, which in addition to providing more compact syntax, can also handle fractional viewport sizes, and the third option is to nest media queries together, so queries inside other queries. So this first example is using the min and max range prefixes and the AND operator. How this works is that the code inside the media query will only be applied when the height of the viewport is both not less than 600 pixels and not greater than 700 pixels. The comparison operators that I just mentioned as being part of CSS Level 4 allow us to replace the min and max range operators with this more compact syntax. If we look at this line for example, this part means when the viewport height is less than or equal to 700 pixels, which is basically the same as this max height prefix. Whereas with this value being to the left of the height property, it's effectively checking if the viewport height is greater than or equal to 600 pixels, which is the same thing as this min height prefix. We can also nest one media query inside another like this. This first block of code is applied whenever the viewport width is greater than or equals to 850 pixels, but this second block of code also requires that the height is not greater than 700 pixels. Therefore the second query is behaving like its feature is being applied by using the logical AND operator. When we want the styling to apply to more than one query, we add a comma after each query, which also acts like an OR operator. For example, we can add this query to the previous example so that it also applies the styling when the orientation is set to portrait. Before we move on to the next section, I just want to draw your attention to the syntax. Notice that syntactically, media features resemble CSS properties in that they typically consist of a feature name, a colon, and a value to test for. Strictly speaking, however, the whole thing is referred to as a media expression, not a CSS property. In this second section, we're going to look at the aspect ratio media feature and the orientation media feature, but we're also going to look at the print media type to find out what that's all about, and we're also going to look at the strange nature of the logical operator NOT. The minimum aspect ratio feature checks the resulting value of the viewport width divided by the viewport height against the value being checked in the expression, and then applies the styling if the expression evaluates to true. For example, 16 divided by 9 when rounded to 2 decimal places equals 1.78, and so in this case, whenever the viewport ratio becomes narrower than 1.78 widescreen, the styling is no longer applied. So as you've just seen, we can either enter the value as a fraction or as a decimal. Now when we contrast that against the orientation media feature, The difference is that orientation checks which side of being square the viewport is, so we can simply check for portrait or for landscape. Now let's take a look at the print media type. When we replace screen with print, the styling stops being applied to the browser view, but is then instead applied for printing purposes. We can check this by opening the print preview, and we can of course print this out on paper. Now let's examine the not operator, which can be a little tricky to understand. So when we have not all on its own, then not surprisingly, it stops the styling from being applied to all media types full stop. But when we combine all with a feature, such as orientation landscape, then in the brain of the browser the syntax looks like this, because not is evaluated last. Translating that into English reads something like, for any media type displaying as landscape, do not apply this styling. Also note that we can't simply add those brackets to the expression to make it clearer, because that would make the syntax invalid, and so we just need to remember that the not operator is evaluated last. As a test, if we now alternate between portrait and landscape in the print preview, we can see that the styling only applies to portrait and that the same is true for the browser view. However, when we change all to the print media type, the behaviour remains the same for print, but the browser now applies the styling for both portrait and landscape. In this third section, we're going to have a very quick look at the hover feature and the pointer feature. Hover's got two settings, which are none and hover, but pointer has got three settings, which are none, coarse and fine. Fine is typically for when you're using a mouse on a desktop, but coarse can be video games consoles or smart TVs, for example. Now there are only two values for the hover feature, which are none and hover. Testing on my desktop, for example, which can of course hover over elements, the styling is applied when set to hover as we expect, and it's also applied for printing purposes. We can also test this by changing VS Code's responsive layout to one of the device presets, and as we can see, the styling isn't applied. And then when we set the value to none, we can see the styling applied as expected. Now we can contrast that against the pointer feature, which has three values, none, coarse and fine. So this is it working as I was expecting on my desktop when set to fine, but it doesn't seem to make sense for any of the device presets, whether set to fine, coarse, or even when set to none. The styling is never applied. So I decided to test the any pointer feature, which is basically the same thing, but that produces exactly the same results. So my question to everyone else is, what's going on with these two pointer features? Is it me doing something wrong, or is CSS Media Queries to blame? Here's something relevant which I found on Stack Overflow, posted in July 2022. So what the heck's going on? I even checked this tutorial example when it's displayed on my phone, which is a Samsung S21, but it's still exactly the same. So this is the final section. There are three last media features that I want to show you, which are display mode, prefers colour scheme, and resolution, but I'll also be mentioning something about the speech media type and also the strange nature of the logical operator only. The display mode feature has 5 settings, but I'm only going to demonstrate full screen because that's the one I found to be the most useful. To display the web page in full screen mode, I just double click my HTML file directly inside Windows Explorer and then pressed F11. As you can see, the styling is applied when I enter full screen mode, and as expected, not for window mode. To test the prefers colour scheme media feature in Microsoft Edge, which is what I'm using, you need to click on the 3 dots and select settings, then click on the settings menu button and then select appearance. Now when you switch between light and dark mode, you'll see the styling being applied. The resolution media feature is used to test the pixel density of the output device, but you can also simulate different resolutions in your browser by zooming in and out like this. Now at the beginning of this final section, I said I'd say something about the speech media type and the logical operator only. So what I'm going to do is draw your attention to this post on Stack Overflow. The user is asking if there are situations where they'd need to use the speech media type in responsive design, but the reply given links to another discussion where they're talking about deprecating the speech media type. And so with that considered, it's probably safe to assume that we can just forget about using speech. And finally, that now brings us to the logical operator only. So this is another Stack Overflow question. The user is asking about screen versus only screen. We've got this answer which summarises the situation, and we've also got this answer which goes into more detail. This is the part that explains about how the logical operator only is handled. So it's saying that everything after the only operator is disregarded by older browsers, and so we can probably just forget about it if we're not concerned about how things look on older browsers. That's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you've found this helpful. If so, then please give it the thumbs up, and you can always subscribe ready for my next video.